Hello everyone, today I'll be reviewing Groundhog Day. So Groundhog Day came out in 1993 and was directed by Ramis. This film stars Bill Murray as a weather reporter called Phil Connors, and Phil has to travel to Punxsutawney in Pennsylvania to cover Groundhog Day. So for those of you who don't know, Groundhog Day is an annual event which takes place every February the 2nd. And the event is focusing on a groundhog which has to emerge from its burrow, and traditionally if the groundhog has a shadow it means that there'll be 6 more weeks of winter, but if it doesn't have a shadow it means that it will be an early spring. So this is an event which Phil Connors he has to cover along with his producer Rita, played by Andie MacDowell, and his cameraman Larry, who's played by Elliott. So they cover the event and Phil is really fed up of it. He really doesn't enjoy his job. He thinks it's a silly event that they have to do every year, and he just wants to get back home. But unfortunately there's lots of snow that hits the town, so it means that he can't go back home immediately. So he ends up having to stay in Punxsutawney overnight. But when he wakes up the next morning he finds out that things seem quite similar, and that he ends up having the exact same conversations with people, and that everybody seems to be rushing towards this place, and he's wondering why. So he goes and chats to people and he finds out that everybody seems to think it's Groundhog Day again, even though it was actually yesterday. And he ends up finding out that he is living the exact same day over and over again. So it happens for this day, and then later on it actually happens the next day. So day after day after day, Phil Connors is living Groundhog Day over and over again, and living the same day over his life, going through the same things every day. So it's really interesting how he watched this film, because we see because as you can imagine there are some bits we see over and over again that Phil has to go through. So first of all, when he wakes up in the morning, the song I Got You Babe by Sonny and Cher is playing on the radio. Then he goes outside, he meets the same people, and when he travels to cover Groundhog Day he always bumps into his old schoolmate Ned Ryerson, who's played by Stephen Tobolowsky, and then covering the event of Groundhog Day again. So as Phil was going through this process he ends up going through these different stages of how he reacts to it. So first of all he's trying to understand, he's thinking, what is going wrong. He ends up seeing a psychiatrist and a doctor, thinking that there's something wrong with him. Then eventually he sort of, asks people, what would you do if you were stuck in one place and nothing you did in life mattered? Then he ends up going through this rebellious phase where he just ends up doing whatever he wants. He steals some money, or he steals a car, and eventually he ends up trying to commit suicide a few times using lots of different methods. But then of course he always wakes up again the next day. Eventually though, we see that he falls in love with Andie MacDowell's character, who is Rita, and when he first starts chatting to her she's not particularly interested, because Phil is perhaps quite a selfish man who doesn't really care about other people. And eventually what he tries to do, each day he finds out a little bit more about her in order to, seduce her I suppose. But it turns out eventually this starts to fail, because the only reason that he's talking to her is because he wants to sleep with her, not because he actually cares about her. So eventually what we see towards the end of the film, he tries to improve himself, he tries to learn new things, he tries to make himself a better person, and he tries to just improve his life in general and try and see the good in people. He ends up helping out a lot of people, he ends up fixing someone's tyre, he ends up giving some money to the poor, he ends up just doing people favours. And as such, it turns out that lots of people in the town seem to know him. He knows who lots of people are, having spoken to lots of people, and eventually things turn out very well for him. So this is one of those films that I've seen a few times now, and it's one of those films that if you think about, you might think that it comes across as quite repetitive. There's lots of the same events, and in some ways, yes, we do see lots of the same events over and over again in this film. But the more times I see it, the more times I see things I didn't spot before, and I always find something new to enjoy from this film. And I think what makes this film work so well is Bill Murray, just because he is absolutely brilliant at playing this really deadpan, sarcastic character who, to be honest, at first comes across as quite unlikable, is quite selfish. But Bill Murray just has this way of playing these sorts of characters so well that at the same time as a film goes on, you can't help but sympathise with his character and like him more, because we see that, you know, he starts to see things differently as the film progresses. And I think this film has a really nice message about wanting to improve yourself, wanting to make the most out of your life, and wanting to help out other people as well. It's just one of those films that really makes you think, you know, what would you do if you were living the same day over and over again? Would you do things differently? And it's just amazing how, you know, a lot of this film is just supposed to be taking place on the same day, yet at the same time Phil ends up doing lots of different things on these different days. There's a few really clever scenes where he tries to repeat the thing that he did before, but because the first time he did it, it was a lot more spontaneous and in the moment, when he tried to recreate that moment the next day, it wasn't quite the same because it was so forced. An example I'm talking about is when he's getting on really well with Andie MacDowell's character Rita, and when they're sort of building a snowman and they're like throwing some snowballs around, seems to be a bit of a connection between the two. Then when they're having a conversation, the next day he tries to repeat it, but it just comes across as so forced and he isn't saying it the right way, and then it just ends up being a bit weird. And simply because the first time it seemed a lot more raw and a lot more, I suppose, emotional, but the second day he was just doing it because, you know, he wanted to sleep with her. I also think that the supporting cast is very good. I mean, Andie MacDowell was a very likeable actress, and yeah, she plays a very likeable character in this film, and yeah, very beautiful as well. So it's quite obvious how Phil was attracted to her, and obviously after all these conversations that he's having with her, that attraction is just ramped up, and he just wants to impress her more and more throughout the film. We also have Chris Elliott, who plays a cameraman called Larry, and although he doesn't get quite as much screen time as some of the other characters, he's a bit of a comic relief in the film. He certainly has a few funny moments here and then, which is always nice to have a bit of added humour to this film. And also Stephen Tobolowsky plays a character called Ned Ryerson, who yeah, at first is a bit of a weird and a bit of annoying character, but is very funny, and we get these interactions between him and Phil which seem to happen every day, which are very amusing, and it's just very funny the way Phil reacts differently each time to seeing him. So overall, I think Groundhog Day is an excellent movie. I really love this film. I've seen it a few times, and yeah, I never really get bored of it, to be honest. It's really nice message, real heartwarming film, and yeah, I think I can't imagine anyone else but Bill Murray in the role of Phil Connors. Just a real nice film with a brilliant message, and one that I would recommend to everyone. I really think it's an excellent film that everybody can enjoy. So I'm going to give Groundhog Day a rating of 10 out of 10. And funnily enough, I actually watched this film on the 2nd of February this year, which was Groundhog Day. So yeah, completely suitable. I didn't even realise at first, actually. I ordered the Blu-ray and I was going to watch it, and then I realised actually Groundhog Day is today, the day that I was about to watch it. So I thought, yes, I have to watch it today because it is Groundhog Day. So I don't have much more to say, except definitely check out Groundhog Day. But as usual, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.